Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello. Today we've got Johanna Walker on the show. Johanna, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Chris. Great to be
who
here.
is Johanna? Go ahead and introduce yourself for us real quick.
I am the fear blasting storytelling maven for coaches, consultants, leaders, and change makers,
I love
also
it.
known as a public speaking coach.
Okay, awesome. I need to come up with something cool like that and catchy for myself because I'm like, hey, I kind of do a couple things. I don't really know. I can't put it in a nice sentence like that. So very, very cool. I'm excited to jump into some stuff here on public speaking. And we talked about before we hit record how speaking can grow your confidence. I found that to be true for myself through just my podcast. So, and you live in Boulder, Colorado, is that correct?
I live right outside of Boulder, Colorado. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I'm just right down the street from you, kind of in Denver. I was actually in Boulder a couple weekends ago. Yeah, very beautiful out there. And are you originally from there? I can't remember if you mentioned.
No, I moved from the East Coast, but I grew up in the Midwest, Chicago and Ohio.
Okay. And how long have you been out in Boulder now?
I've been in Boulder 15 years.
Awesome. It's a beautiful place. It really is.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you love it there.
I love it. I love it. I love the blue sky. I love that it's so easy to get around by bike.
Yes.
And that I can ride my bike even through the winter. There are some days where it's hard to be on the bike, but the way the winter works is it snows and then the sun comes out and melts all the snow.
Melts it all away.
Like a whole day, it's pretty clear for riding.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happens. I actually was not used to snow. I'm from Houston, Texas. I just moved here a couple months ago, and we came a day after the crazy snowstorm, and I was like, I don't know if we're gonna make it out here. Like I'm already getting stuck on day one in the snow. But it was so beautiful. I just couldn't, get enough of it. And so we'll see how we do this next winter, but we caught the end of it here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're a public speaking coach. How long have you been doing that for, and how did that start? Did you always kind of know you wanted to get into that, or I always love hearing the formation story?
Not at all. No, I was an incredibly quiet kid. I would go for days without speaking. I was just like,
days?
My job. Yeah, days. My job was to get the right answer. And if I didn't know the right answer, I didn't speak. If I wasn't 100% sure that I had the right answer, I didn't speak. So I would go, and I was terrified in the lunchroom, figuring out who to talk to and who to hang out with and on the playground, So I can remember standing at the bus stop one day, counting on my fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that was 5 days where I didn't say a word.
Wow.
So yeah, it was not in the cards. If I were to tell my 12-year-old self that I became a public speaking coach and a speaker and that amazing. I spoke regularly on stages, she would be like, no way.
No, I haven't spoken for 5 days. What are you talking about?
So I've been in my business as a coach for the last 8 years. Before that, most of my speaking was in the creative world as a theater artist, a poet, a storyteller. So I was for many years both performing as a theater artist and directing and teaching as a theater artist. And about 8 years ago, I had a student in one of my classes was invited to give a TEDx talk, and she asked me to help her. And I was a starving artist. I knew nothing about the world of speaking. I knew nothing about the world of business. And I said, sure, I'll see what I can do. And I worked with her using my theater skills to help her create her TEDx talk. And it was fun. And I thought, oh, this is cool. I could do it. I could work as a public speaking coach. And I had no idea what that even meant. But I worked with a coach and I started developing this business and kind of going in blind. I totally went in blind. If anybody had told me at that point what it really meant to own a business, I would have said, no way can I do that. But there was a point, this is the moment, there was a point where my coach, he was a colleague in my theater program, and who had a business as a public speaking coach. And so he was helping me build the business and figure out how to translate my theater skills to the business world and the speaking world. And then a few months in, he said, now you have to go speak. We're going to have to find a place for you to speak. And I was like, wait, no,
I'm not ready.
No, I don't do that. I don't do that. I can help people speak, but I don't have anything to say. I'm not a speaker. He was like, no, Johanna, if you're going to be a coach, you're going to have to speak. And I was like, really? No, I'm terrified.
You had the flashbacks to the past of not talking for the 5 days at a time.
I had figured, I was comfortable as a theater performer. I was comfortable on stage. I was on stages a lot as an artist, but to get on stage as a speaker, as an authority, and say, this is what I think, and what I have to say has value to you, and this is a new idea worth listening to, an idea worth sharing, that was not me. And I was just like, no way. So I face planted in my old stories, and then I did it.
And it wasn't so bad, right? Were you extremely nervous, or did it feel like a weight lifted off your shoulders?
Well, the first few times I did it, my goal was just to make it through. My goal was just to make it through and just to survive. And I did survive. I remember when I booked my first gig, I had been at this marketing workshop, and our assignment was to write what we do in a Twitter pitch in 140 characters. We had to communicate what we did. And so I wrote my Twitter pitch, and everybody had to stand up and do the Twitter pitch. Worked so hard on getting it down to 140 characters. I did my Twitter pitch, and I remember being kind of resentful because other people talked a lot longer. And I was like, oh, I'm such a good student. I played by the rules, and I got it down to 140, and other people were just yammering away. But at the end of that session, somebody came up to me and said, hey, will you come speak to my group?
Awesome.
Your pitch. And so that's what I always say, like clarity and keeping it short and clear is the most effective. So anyway, I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll come speak to your group, no problem. And then I went home and threw up over the toilet for 3 months until it was
until it was time.
Yeah, until it was time. And so what initially my goal was just to get through. And so then I started getting through. I was like, how do I actually use speaking now to generate clients? Because I was just surviving. Yeah. I was doing fine. And because I had experience as a theater artist, I engaged the audience. I did okay. But then I really had to figure out, how do I do this to actually generate clients? How do I convert this talk into more people interested in my work? Mm-hmm. So then that was a whole nother layer of study and figuring out how to do that in a meaningful way that isn't salesy and schwarmy, but really just communicates value.
Right. So wait, remind me again of the timeline. When was that first speech that you did that your coach prompted you to do?
Was about 8 years ago.
8 years ago. And were you embracing the coaching at that moment? You were already starting to say, I'm going to help people become public speakers?
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't really know what that meant. Like I said, I had been an artist. I lived on the fringe. I wasn't in the business world at all. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, yeah, I think I can do this. And I really was feeling my way in the dark. I had helped a lot of people create solo performances. So I wasn't completely coming in without any skill. I had a lot of skill. I just didn't know exactly how it was going to serve a speaker. I was so new in the world of speaking.
And it was a different application in a way as well, versus instead of the scripts and putting yourself into a role, you're actually coming up with your own, like you said, your own thoughts and feelings. And are you a subject matter expert in that field, or can you be a thought leader, which is a different level of, I can see how it's not like you're hiding behind it, but when you have the role, you memorize the script and you're in that role. It's almost like hey, this isn't me. I'm acting out as the character. Whereas here, this is me. What I say, people will associate to me, will they resonate with my message?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a different level, I would imagine, of ownership of I want to make sure I do a good job because this is going to reflect on me as a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very powerful though. So 8 years ago, and how has the coaching been going? Have you attracted a ton of clients? Are you doing a lot of stuff online with everything happening over the last few years?
Yeah, I have. Well, then, 8 years ago, I was starting to have clients and starting to find my way into the the role as a coach
Uh-huh.
and also the role as a speaker. I was doing both things. I was kind of leaping onto the stage to be a speaker and share my ideas at the same time that I was leaping into the coaching world and really saying, yeah, I have something, I can help you. So that has certainly developed over the years myself. And I've worked one-on-one with folks. I have a couple of group programs that I lead. I occasionally do corporate trainings. I'll work with a team inside a company. So I have worked with people in a lot of different ways. And in the last year, certainly before COVID, most of my work was in person. I was
Yeah.
I come from a theater world, from dance and being embodied. So a lot of the work that I did really, it felt really important to be in the room with people.
Yeah.
Because
to feel their energy and their emotions as well.
Yeah, and their breath and their voice and their physicality, and really getting all of that present and connected. Because I think when people are afraid, their body shuts down. You stop breathing and your belly gets nauseous and your heart really fast, and all the ways your body responds. That so much of the way that I worked it felt really important to be in person, to channel that energy, to collect that energy and transform it into power and confidence. And I always talk about that fear being actually your battery pack.
That's cool.
All that said, when COVID hit, I was like, okay, I got to figure out the online thing. So I pivoted one of my programs to be online. I had just built an online class. I've been teaching a class to help people craft a talk. And I take people through the process of crafting their signature talk. And I had just started building that content into an online course when COVID hit. So I was actually running a beta of that online. It was content I'd been teaching for 8 years, but I was running a beta for the online course. And then COVID hit. So I was like, oh, look, I have an online course. So
that's time to go all in on that, right?
Yeah, all in on that. And then the other program that I was so determined, Speaker's Playground, I call it. It's where people have a chance to get on their feet. I call it Johanna style Toastmasters. People can get on their feet and try stuff and make mistakes and take risks and just build more confidence as a speaker. And doing it online is fantastic too. It's a whole, speaking online is very different from speaking on a stage.
Yeah.
But it's very important to learn how to connect through the screen, how to be more present and embodied through the screen.
Absolutely. And I would imagine it's actually, I did a first speaking engagement in a way to a real estate brokerage office a week or two ago. And I hadn't really done much speaking in person for a while as well. And I had gotten to the point before, maybe 2 years ago, where I was speaking frequently enough where I wasn't really nervous anymore. Uh-huh. And then all of a sudden, after not doing it for 2 years, I've done so many podcasts here where it's just me and the microphone and a webcam, but all of a sudden there's 20 people in the room and I was kind of nervous again, but I ended up breaking through, I think, pretty quickly. You just have to get the repetitions in, which I'm sure you teach to your clients. And like you did with your speaking, you just started signing up for more and more talks, and you became more and more comfortable through time and practice.
Yeah, I've said the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker is 1,000 speeches.
I love that. That's so true. It's just the practice makes perfect. We hear it all the time, and we just assume we're going to go up and deliver an amazing TEDx or TED Talk. When we don't practice, it just doesn't happen. We have to do the repetitions.
Yeah. And the other thing I say is, I like to say practice makes better rather than practice makes
right. Better. There's never perfect.
We're not going for perfect. But better, yes. We want to always be growing and improving.
Yes.
And so many of our habits as speakers are unconscious, like the bad habits, the habits that undermine your effectiveness as a speaker.
Shifting around and clicking your pen or something.
Yeah, and filler words and slapping your thighs with your hands and just
even just being awkwardly pacing around and just not. Yeah. Those are the tough things that you don't really, no one ever teaches you that. I guess maybe if you go to Toastmasters, but not in school. I
That's
can't
a lot of what
remember.
I work with in Speakers Playground, because what I say is practice makes better, but better practice makes change. That if
I
you
love
get
that.
those reps without intention, without intentionally creating new habits, you're going to just get really good at your bad habits.
Yes. So you
It's
said
just,
practice makes better and better practice makes change.
yeah, yeah,
That's powerful. I
yeah.
love
So
that.
how you practice really determines how, if you can really change and grow. If you get those 1,000 reps, the difference between a good speaker and a great speaker is 1,000 speeches. That while you're doing those speeches, practicing on stage and off, it's very important that you be intentional and aware of what you're practicing and how you're practicing, and kind of getting out of your comfort zone in order to create new habits and new pathways. Because habits are super comfortable.
Right. It's
You
what
know,
we already do.
it's what we do. But new habits can be uncomfortable, so it's easy to slip back into old habits. But it's
Absolutely.
important to kind of stay in that zone of, this is a little uncomfortable, but I'm actually creating some new habits.
And it's even important to practice as if you were actually delivering the speech, because sometimes people kind of hold back, well, this isn't the real thing. I'm just going to go through the motions. But however you show up at practice is how you'll show up at the game or at the actual speech when it's showtime. And you want to make sure that you're bringing your A game to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to practice in playful ways too, like not just whispering under, like, okay, I'm going to give my talk like this, that kind of practice where you're
Yeah.
just whispering under your breath. But I say, like, practice like you're a Baptist preacher and you're just like, delivering the truth.
The passion. Yes.
Yeah, or run it. Practice while you're running or riding your bike, so you can really feel your breath, get out of breath, and you're really in your body, and you're giving your talk while you're moving. That can be a great way to really get it in your bones.
That's a
I
really
like to
great
find
idea.
different ways to practice that just so that it's second nature, that it's,
It's
it,
part of you. Yeah.
not just like I'm reading the script off the roof of my head.
Right. I kind of have flashbacks to elementary school or middle school. I remember the oratoricals where you had to memorize a poem or something, and you had to
Yeah.
sit there and read to the class and just memorize. I can't even remember which ones I did, but it was so stressful because first you had to commit it to memory. Second, you had to read it in front of people and deliver. Well, not read it, but actually recite it. And so it was just a lot going on there where you had to do word for word, and you got graded against how accurate you were and your tonality and things like that. I can't even remember really, but I just remember the feeling of being nervous back then. And so I love that about public speaking, I guess, is that you're able to, you don't have to just recite something. You can just go off of a few bullet points or key points and then create your own words. And it can be a little bit different every single time.
Yeah, and then that can help you be more conversational and
Right.
relaxed and actually respond to what's happening in the moment and how the audience is responding. And, so you're not just, reciting.
Reciting it. Yeah. So do you have any tips for anybody who's nervous at public speaking or just refuses to do it or is afraid of live videos? Any tips at all for how to break through that? Obviously, I know you said you just have to do the repetitions, but how do you just sign up for something?
Well, I think one is, I say, go before you're ready. If
Okay.
you wait till you're ready, or I'm all for practice and preparation, right? But I
Yep.
think readiness is also a state of mind, that if you
Right.
don't feel ready, and if you wait till you feel ready, you might be waiting for decades.
Yes.
So go before you're ready, take the leap, put yourself out there. I think when we do that, what happens is we just have to dig deeper into our well and pull up your power. You get to pull it up and use it, and then it's yours. So when you
Yes.
take that leap, you got to dig deeper to find your voice and find what you have to say and put it out there and risk messing up, risk falling on your face. And, but when you do that, you get access to a part of yourself that isn't your everyday self. and then you just get bigger.
Yes,
So I think that's
absolutely.
one thing, is go before you're ready. And I think the other big one regarding fear is to change the story about the fear. We tell ourselves, or many people, I think, get caught in a story that fear is a problem. I have to make the fear go away. Oh no, my knees are shaking. Oh no, I'm nauseous. My heart is beating too fast. Here it goes again. Oh, I'll never be good at this. I'm an awful public speaker. This is awful. We get into that story.
Right.
And that story just like goes on and on. It feeds on itself, and it always ends at I suck, And so when we can rewrite that story and say, oh, this is an interesting sensation, we can turn the fear into sensation. It is sensation. Turn it into power. So when you can get out of the story that lives up here in your head and drop down into your body, your breath and your heart, and the sensation of what's happening in the moment. Oh, my heart's beating fast. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a little nauseous in my belly. Let me
Just acknowledge it.
acknowledge it, and don't turn it into, oh my God, I can't breathe. Oh my God. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like rewrite the story, tell a different story. And then that fear can actually be a source of power.
That's awesome. I think you said something. Did you just say fear is like a battery in a way? It's your source of power.
Yeah, it's energy. Fear is energy.
That's
it's
awesome.
Vibration. Your voice is vibration.
Yes.
So when you can use the vibration and the energy of the fear to actually power your voice, that's how fear becomes your battery pack. That's
powerful. I've heard a quote that I really love. I think it said something along the lines of feel the fear and do it anyway. Yeah. It's such an empowering feeling when you acknowledge that you're afraid of something and you jump into it, you lean into it. When you go and you do that speech or you try something that is outside of your comfort zone, going up to somebody who you admire, but you're just afraid that they may be too at a high level for you, and you still introduce yourself and just tell them that you feel that way. Hey, I admire your work. I look up to you. I hope to be somewhat like you one day. I mean, that is such a powerful feeling whenever you actually take that momentum and turn it into something. You turn it into energy. Yeah. Yeah. And I think feel the fear. Like there are two parts to that. Feeling the fear and do it anyway. Yes. Don't skip over feeling the fear. It's not going to kill you. But when you actually feel it, you become more present in this moment. And I don't know about you, the speakers that I'm drawn to are the ones who really show up present, fully present, with their full heart and body and breath and mind. Yes. That's when I connect. That's when I can lean in. So when you feel the fear, it's uncomfortable and it's scary, Right. Because you might not feel like you're in the driver's seat, but when you actually feel it and own it and get present with it, that actually brings you into the present moment in a deeper way and makes you're more fully in the room for people to receive what you have to say. And people could relate to that more whenever you're actually vulnerable and you share the emotional part. And if you get emotional while you're speaking, because you're so into what you're talking about, that it is truly your emotions. It's not part of an act. It is how you are feeling and showing up. That's when I also get very drawn in when you're hearing someone's story, and even shows on TV, some actors and actresses are very good at that, where they draw you into the story where I'm like, I know this is a fake story, but why am I so sad that this person just had this loss, or, a death in the family, or some difficult moment that they're enacting? Yeah. I think that as a speaker, a lot of people ask me, every time I talk, I cry, or if I'm telling something too vulnerable, I cry, and crying is bad, and I don't want to cry on stage. And I always say, there's no problem with crying. If you are speaking something that moves you and that awakens emotion, that's okay. That's energy too. Yes.
Let the energy come, let it flow. Just don't let it swallow you. Like if it turns out you're like, oh, this
You
horrible
can't
thing
even
happened,
talk.
and I'm such a suffering, and I've had such a hard life, and I'm suffering, and it's so, I don't want to get like save that for your therapist.
Right, because now we're losing. We can't understand what you're saying, and we're losing the context and the point of the story or the speech.
Yeah, and it's not my job as the audience to be your counselor.
Right.
It's important that you have done the work on your story or your content so that you're not mired in it, but you actually have some perspective. You're on the other side of it, and you can share the treasure and the wisdom that you've gained from it. And if emotion comes, let it come, but stay connected to your audience. Stay connected to the message you're delivering, because it's not really about you. It's about your audience. It's about the gift that you're giving them.
Absolutely.
So let the tears come as energy, but don't get swallowed by them.
That's great advice. And so making sure that you actually have conquered that story where you're on the other side and you're able to convey that message that this is for your audience to get something out of it. It's not just for us to make our pitch and land new clients. You want to make sure that they are positively impacted by the message you're delivering.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, vulnerability, everybody says, be vulnerable, be vulnerable, be vulnerable. And yes, vulnerability, we want your humanity in your heart. But ultimately, the vulnerability is about creating a space where you can connect to the audience and they connect to their own story. And they see themselves in your story. So it's very important to position your vulnerability so that it's relevant to your audience. So
That's
that
powerful.
they can really plug into their own story.
Yeah, that way they get the most out of it as well. Instead of being like, oh, I can't relate to this, or this doesn't really apply to me, they can think of something in their lives that is a similar story or situation where they're facing similar challenges, and they see how you got through yours, and it gives them hope for how they can get through theirs.
Exactly. Yeah.
So do you have a framework that you teach your clients on? Maybe like, I always hear, tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, something along those lines. Do you have some sort of framework for public speeches?
I do. I teach a whole course on how to craft a talk, how to come up with the big idea. What's the big idea for a lot of people? Even just, they have a gazillion ideas and they want to try to say everything. So it's like, how do you?
That would be me.
And me too. I mean, we all do it, but I always say the less you say, the more they hear.
That's awesome.
Really home it in and dial it down to what's the one thing you want them to remember. So we work on that. What's the big idea? And then what's the story you can tell that can support that big idea? Your story is not really about your story. It's not, like I've said, nobody really cares about you except your mom and your therapist and maybe your best friend.
Very sad to hear, but it's true. We're all kind of selfish in that way.
So what's the story that can really support that big idea? And that's going to take the audience to the place they want to go. So then the other big question, which a lot of people kind of skip over, is who's in the audience? Who are you talking
that's
to?
important.
What do they want? Why are they here today? What do they want in their lives? What do they want in their business or whatever it is? Whoever your audience is really knowing who are you speaking to? And when you speak to, when you create your talk, you speak to that person and you know what they struggle with and what they long for and what keeps them up at night and what they dream about, what they think is, whether or not they think they'll ever get what they want. And when you know that, then you can really craft your talk so that person in your audience thinks, oh my God, she's talking to me. She wrote that talk for me.
That's awesome. No, that's a very great question too. Who's in the audience?
Who's your audience? Oh yeah.
I skip over that all the time. I just jump on a podcast and I'm like, all right, let's talk. I don't even take the time. So it's important to stop and ask that question. Who is that person? What do they need? What keeps them up at night? So you have a better idea of how to speak exactly to them.
Exactly. Then the other big piece is, so we've got the big idea, we've got the story, we've got the audience. The other big piece is the call to action.
Right.
what do you want them to do at the end? What do you want them to do or think or feel as a result of your talk? Sometimes you can be so passionate about your ideas and your stories and all the brilliant wisdom that you have to share, and you just spew out all the wisdom, and then it's over. And I'm in the audience. I'm like, okay, that was cool.
What
What
next?
now?
Yeah.
What next? So to be very specific and clear about what's the action you want your audience to take, and how is taking that action going to make their life better? How is taking that action going to help them get what they want? So you got to know what they want in order to be able to speak directly to that.
How will taking that action help them get what they want? So there's a lot of questions there that you have to ask, obviously. Who's in the audience? What do they need help with? And that goes into making sure that your talk and your call to action align with the problem that they're actually trying to solve.
Right. Yeah. And if your talk solves their problem, then boom, they're there.
Yeah. And if you do a great job at that too, and even advertisements do this, sometimes they do such a good job of explaining that exact problem you're facing that you don't hit that skip ad button. You're like, wait a second, this is something that I'm dealing with, and let me listen to it. And oh, they've got some good testimonials. I'm actually interested. Let me opt in for that free guide, or let me jump on a coaching call and see what they have to offer.
Yeah, definitely.
That's powerful. So lots of great nuggets here. Is there anything else you typically, I know you said you had a whole course on it, so we're just talking about the bird's eye view of how to do this, but do you have any other suggestions for anybody who's getting used to crafting speeches or maybe starting to go on other podcasts? I know a lot of people who are starting to jump on and just share their stories, and they're kind of scattered all over the place, and I'm still guilty of doing that. So maybe pausing to ask those questions like we talked about, who's in the audience, what do they need help with, and then crafting your message around there. Any other points you'd like to add to what we've covered so far?
I think when you're creating, thinking about the call to action, what do you want the audience to, how is the audience going to get what they want as a result of taking the action that you ask them to do? But also, how are you going to get what you want? So it's also knowing, why are you giving this talk? Why does it matter to you? I think when you can communicate, when you can answer the question, why do I care? And why should they care? So when you get clear about your own why, and I think that can come in two different packages. One is why I want to have an impact. I want to have an impact. I want to make a difference in the world. I have some nugget of truth, some nugget of wisdom, something I've figured out that I know can make a difference in people's lives, and I want to have that impact. So it's being very clear about that impact you want to have. And then second is, especially for a lot of the clients I work with, they're using speaking as a marketing tool. So yeah, they want to have an impact. They want to share their big idea. They want to step into thought leadership and share their authority and be visible as an expert. And they want people to come into their world, to come into their sphere, to join their programs, to hire them. So it's being very clear about what's the journey you're taking your audience on that's going to get them there. It's going to get them to say, oh, yes, I want to have a conversation with you. Yes, I want to join that program. Yes, I'm going to write you the check. Yes, I want to work with you. I want to hear more of what you have to say. So it's being very clear about both those things. What's the impact you want to have in the world and in your audience? And also, how does this talk fit into the larger pipeline of your business? What's next? What's after the talk? How are you going to nurture that relationship?
Right.
How are you going to invite people in and stay connected?
Awesome. So for your call to action, I know just from the podcast circuits, a lot of people offer some sort of free guide, or they drive people to a certain landing page where they can schedule a call or subscribe to some sort of email newsletter. Is that typically what you see a lot of your clients do as well? Or is it something more direct, like, hey, if you're interested, go to this link or text this number and you're going to get a time to book with me right now? I'm just kind of curious to see your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it really depends on the situation, depends on the stage, depends on the event. Sometimes it's and it depends on how much time you've spent with the audience, how much of a
Mhm.
relationship have you developed. So if you're giving a 10-minute talk, you might yes, offer a free gift, send them to the landing page. If you have more time to develop a relationship, you might be able to offer a low investment workshop where they're actually signing up at the end of the talk. There might be a more very broad call to action that's like, tell your story. The one talk I gave, the call to action was, tell a story, tell a hard one, tell the one that takes you to the edge. So there's no specific like sign up for this XYZ, but the call to action is just it's more connected to the vision. Tell a story. Go tell a story, tell the hard one. And that talk that I'm referring to, it was not a marketing talk. It didn't specifically make an offer, but it has drawn so many people to my business.
Right.
Because they heard me tell a story. They saw me on the stage being vulnerable, telling a story of mine, and people have reached out and said, oh, I want to tell after hearing you tell your story, I want to tell my story.
That's awesome.
So there are a lot of different ways to bring people in through your speaking.
And I just know I wrote that down here too, speaking as a marketing tool, because that's really the first point of contact for a lot of people, whether you're on another podcast or they just hear you speaking at an event. That's the first time many people know, or at least get introduced to you, unless it's some kind of big event where they know Grant Cardone with 10X Growth Con or whatever. People know that name, face. There's some celebrity there. He's got a huge following. But for us going on other podcasts and shows, we have to make sure that we make a very good positive impression and impact and make sure that person's transformed. And even without the call to action, I love how you said you didn't even have one there and people still reached out, because if they like you, they're going to find a way to follow you and to get into your ecosystem and get on your email list and see how they can work with you.
Yeah.
So that's been the strategy for me too. I'm just going to go talk to a bunch of people. I like people. Hopefully they like me back and maybe we work together on something one day,
Right. Yeah. Building a business is a lot about building relationships.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of different ways to build relationships, and speaking is so fantastic because you're building a relationship with potentially hundreds of people at one time.
One to many.
If you're speaking to an audience of 300 people, you're building a relationship with 300 people. And when you can show up as a human being and show your humanity, show your vulnerability, show your expertise, show that you have the magic, the juju that's going to help them get what they want to lean in for more. So then you nurture that relationship. And it's just how speaking can amplify your expertise and your thought leadership in such a big way, because if you get out there and do it right, people want to lean in, people want more.
Yeah. So I do have another question and I know we're kind of running short on time, but for those in the audience who want to start doing more speeches, because I have people pitch me all the time who want to be on my podcast. I'm like, have you ever been on any podcasts? Are you going to do a good job? Do you have any content I can check out? So one does not simply just sign up to go speak at TEDx or, a TED Talk, right? There's got to be some kind of criteria. So any suggestions on how we can do that? Is it mainly just leveraging our network or raising our hand when someone says they're looking for guest speakers at an online or in-person event?
I think it's a lot of things. It's yes. So, okay.
Everything.
Remember, we're going for 1,000 speeches. The difference between
yes.
and a great speaker is 1,000 speeches. And I always say, anytime you have the opportunity to speak, say yes and count that as one of your speeches. Even if it's a 1-minute introduction at a networking event, you make that introduction as if it is the most important speech of your life. Because in that moment it is. The one you're giving right now is the most important speech of your life. And so you own that. When you have the opportunity to introduce yourself, you take a stand for your genius and your expertise. You plant your feet on the ground or in front of the screen, and you own that 1-minute speech like your life depends on it. So anytime you have the opportunity, raise your hand and take a stand for your voice, take a stand for your ideas, Take a stand for your message. Put them out there, even if it's uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be on a stage in front of people. Put them to start warming the engine. Put your ideas out. There are a lot of local groups, and even in the last year on COVID, at first it seemed like, oh, the speaking industry is dead because of COVID, but then actually I had a lot more opportunity for speaking because I could speak to groups all over the country.
Right, from your computer.
They have to fly me out. So there were a lot of opportunities to reach people all over the country, all over the world. So there are a lot of groups looking for speakers. And they're low stakes groups, they're networking events, Rotary clubs. That can be a great place to start for people just to get your feet underneath you. And I think when you can communicate the value that you deliver to the meeting planner, that's what they want. They want to bring value to their group. So when you can communicate to an event planner, a meeting planner, here's the value I deliver, they're going to want you on that stage because they want to deliver a great event for their people. So it's all about communicating value.
I love that. Speak anytime you can and own it. Sorry, go ahead.
Once you start getting on those stages and you do a great job, people are going to refer you. People are going to invite you back. People are going to introduce you to other people. And before you know it, you're a speaker.
That's cool. I know that's just like what you said, networking and relationships is a huge part of it. And just like if you're at a networking event where you meet one person, you introduce somebody else to somebody else, and then they do some business together, and then they remember you, and then they send someone your way. It's a big network effect where even if you have that 1 minute, do it like your life depends on it. And when you make that impact, you're going to have other opportunities. And I think you shared that in your story too, where you did your speech and someone invited you to go speak at something else a few months later. So that's a perfect example of how showing up was, I guess, 98% of success is just showing up, a lot of people say, because you showed up, you spoke, and that gave you the opportunity to go do that again, which helped you get closer and closer towards those 1,000 speeches.
Yep. And I had worked really hard on being clear and concise in my pitch that day. It's a great exercise. A Twitter, say what you deliver, say the value you deliver in 140 characters. When you can do that, boom, it's not confusing. And so I always say, yes, put yourself out there. The more clear and concise you can be in your message and the value you deliver, that's when people are going to be attracted to you. That's when they're going to want to follow you.
Yeah. And less really is more, because in that example, you said there were many other people who went over the time and they spent more time and they probably started getting a little confusing and maybe saying things that didn't really make sense. But because you delivered it so clearly and concisely, it's more memorable. It's like a tweet versus a long Facebook post. No one's going to remember all of that stuff that you mentioned. But if it's even quotes, we can all say so many quotes that we like from motivational books or speakers because they're so nice and punchy. They have a great call to action or motivational message or whatever, but they're so easy to remember because it's short and concise.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. So what is your normal call to action? Whenever you do a speech or at the end of a podcast, do you have a certain, hey, book a call with me? I'm just curious. I know it varies by person to person in speech, but just curious to see if you have one that you like to gravitate to.
It really depends.
On the audience as well.
It depends on the audience. It depends on where I am in my marketing cycle. I have I have a couple of group programs. My talk crafting program is called Craft Your Talk. And then I have another, the Johanna style Toastmasters, the delivery, presence, confidence class, speakers playground. So I fill both of those programs by offering free webinars.
Oh, okay.
So at the free webinar, I invite people into the program. If I'm giving a talk, depending on the timing and what's coming up, I would most likely invite people to the free webinar.
Okay.
And then from the free webinar, I invite them into the program. And, sometimes what makes the most sense is just to offer a free gift. I have a couple of how to tell a better story, 5 mistakes you don't want to make when public speaking. So again, it's value. I'm delivering value. People are getting value from it, but then I'm going to be able to stay connected to them and nurture that relationship.
Right. So with that said, do you have a call to action you'd like for our audience today? I know you've got a couple of different things that you cycle through, just depending on the timing, but where can our audience go to learn more about you, to connect with you, and to dive into your world?
Well, yeah, I do this online speakers playground program. The one that pivoted, it was in person, and now it's
now it's online. Yeah,
I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to be opening up an in-person group in the next few months, but I'm going to keep the online group going. It's going great, and awesome. It's rolling membership. People can join at any time. So I'd love to invite you guys to come as a guest. I invite anybody to come to one session for free.
Very cool.
Just to check it out. So if anybody wants to check it out, you can go to my website, johannawalker.com, and there's links there to Speakers Playground and Craft Your Talk, my other program.
Perfect. I will link that all up in the show notes. And did you have any last key takeaways that you'd like for our audience to run off with today?
Well, I already said go before you're ready. So
that's powerful. I love that.
If you have the call, if you hear the call to speak, I think a lot of people think of speaking as a one-day thing. Like one day down the road, I'm going to get out there.
Yep.
One day down the road, I'm going to give a TEDx talk. One day down the road, I'm going to speak at a higher level. And so go before you're ready. If you hear the call, there's somebody out there who needs to hear what you have to say. There's somebody out there who needs to hear what you have to say, and they're still struggling because you haven't said it yet. So that's to remember, awesome. To one, go before you're ready, and two, it's not about you.
Yes. And I think when we shift that in our mind, it helps us show up for those people who need us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also really cuts through the fear. When you really get in your bones that it's not about you, then you just like, okay, I got to do this. I got to do this. That for both my TEDx talk and I gave another talk that it was a TED style talk. Very definitely on my edge. I found myself on my own edge of just like, oh my God, Johanna, why do you put yourself through this? Why do you do this? And every time I get out there and speak and somebody is impacted, somebody's life has changed and they tell me, I'm like, oh, that's right.
That's why. That's for them.
And when you can remember that, it does slice right through the fear.
I love it. Go before you're ready, and it's not all about you. Because selfishly, if we just think about ourselves, it makes us uncomfortable. We don't want to do it. When you think about that person who hasn't grown or learned that lesson because you haven't been there to tell it to them, it helps you show up in a whole nother way.
Yeah.
Well, Johanna, that was so awesome. I took a lot of notes, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you once again for joining us on the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast.
Thanks for inviting me. So fun to talk to you.
Thank you. We'll be in touch, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okie doke. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.